Hello. Welcome again to the Rotten Horror Picture Show, the horror movie podcast where we talk about films off of the Rotten Tomatoes 200. It started off so good.
You were still doing really good.
My brain froze. I don't know if you would have been able to hear it, but you could see it when my eyes just went cross-eyed.
I saw it.
We talk about films off the Rotten Tomatoes 200.
Is it because I'm standing here with these flashing strobe lights?
Yes.
Is that what's disturbing you?
Yes. And there's a pain in my foot that's very distracting. We talk about films off the Rotten Tomatoes 200 Best Horror Movies of All Time list. My name is Clay, and with me as always is Amanda. How you doing, Amanda?
Oh, I'm great. I'm just about as great as a man in a tent in the woods with a very sharp axe.
Who could be better than that, really?
What else could we all ask for?
No, not much. We usually, as I said, cover movies off the Rotten Tomatoes 200 Best Horror Movies of All Time list, but on every fifth movie, we do a wild card movie that is not on the list, and this is our landmark 60th episode.
Woo!
Which, unfortunately, has an asterisk next to it because if you are a listener of the show, you know that I deleted episode 58, Bram Stoker's Dracula, by accident.
Boo, hiss.
But I'm going to continue with the numbering as it stands, and then eventually, somewhere down the line, episode 58 will pop up on your feed.
The lost episode.
Yes, but since this is episode 60, we're doing a wild card, and it's Amanda's choice,
yes,
and so she has chosen In the Earth from 2021, a Ben Wheatley movie, an English horror movie. Now, had you seen this before?
I had not. I had read some spoiler-free stuff about it.
Mm-hmm.
I had watched the trailer a few times, and I very much wanted to see it.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to force all of you to experience this with me.
Yeah, based on because we had talked about it a little bit. I can't remember if I mentioned it in the last episode, but I thought it might have been included in that folk horror documentary that came out last year.
It might be in the documentary itself. Yeah. It might be mentioned, but it's not in the box set.
It's not in the set,
yeah.
Yes. If it's not in the documentary, they should go add some of the footage of this into it because I think it would fit very well.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure it is. I think I remember seeing clips from this in the movie, but I honestly can't remember.
Yeah, it's a long movie. The documentary, I mean.
Yes. If you're interested in folk horror, definitely seek it out because it's a really great documentary.
Yes.
Which, I don't know the name of it, but
Woodlands Dark and Days Bewitched.
There we go. That's what Amanda's here for.
Names, proper nouns.
Yep, all the stuff that just goes in one ear and out the other.
Just call me Encyclopedia Brown.
I had not even really, having seen that documentary, the name did not register with me when you suggested it.
Yeah, you were sort of confused.
Yes.
When I first brought it up, you were like, what are you talking about?
Yes. And I did know that it was by Ben Wheatley, who is someone who I have heard a lot of great stuff about, but had never actually seen one of his films.
Oh, really?
Yes. So I was excited to get into that.
Neat.
Listener Kyle is upset that Ben Wheatley's masterpiece, according to him, Kill List, is no longer on our main list.
Oh.
And so we will probably end up doing that as a wild card at some point. Especially, I didn't know anything about, not that this is about Kill List, but I, in reading stuff about this movie, saw people mentioning Kill List and gave like a one-sentence synopsis of Kill List.
Yep.
And now I want to watch Kill List.
I am kind of shocked you have not.
Yeah, I'm very excited to watch that now.
Okay.
So
I'm going to say nothing about it.
Yeah, that might be my next wild card pick.
Sweet. Just do Ben Wheatley corner.
Yeah. So I think we're going to play the trailer for you right now, and then we will come back and we will talk about In the Earth.
He told me his story. These are his memories. Can you feel him now? In the earth.
No, I don't know what you mean.
I think you do.
So what are you working on?
Searching ways of making crops more efficient.
Funny place to study crops in a forest.
We had to send a rescue party in to get a group out a couple of months ago. They got lost.
Why didn't they use GPRS?
There's no phone reception in there. People get a bit funny in the woods sometimes.
worried she's going to get you.
Yeah, who is it?
It's a local folk tale. She's the spirit of the woods. Wake up. Something's there. Listen. Someone's watching us. I saw something in the woods.
It wants to talk.
What do you want?
Everything seems to just keep us here.
Okay, In the Earth from 2021. This has a, it's not on our list, as I said, but it has a 79% Rotten Tomatoes score, and it has a 24% audience score. Now, that is something that's I would like to talk about, because I also, when I pulled this up on IMDb, it has like a 5.2 IMDb rating.
People fucking hate this movie.
Yeah, and most of the reviews were like, waste of time,
Yeah.
1 star, wish I had those 2 hours back. And I was like, I don't know what they were expecting,
Yeah.
or what movie they watched. But
I don't know if they were expecting sort of 28 Days Later, but in the woods or something.
I don't know.
But that's not what this is.
I mean, to be fair, it's called In the Earth. They don't even go into the Earth once in this movie. So
Everybody thought it was Journey to the Center of the Earth remake.
So false advertising as far as I'm concerned. It is directed by Ben Wheatley, written by Ben Wheatley, starring Joel Fry, Reese Shearsmith, Haley Squires, Elora Torchia, John Hollingworth, Mark Monero, and that's it. There's nobody else in this movie.
Yeah, that's the whole cast.
Amanda, what happens in the Earth? What happens in the Earth?
As the world
The
searches
film In the Earth.
Ugh,
What
okay.
happens in
All right.
the Earth?
Yes, we understand. Are you done?
Yes.
Okay. As the
A movie. No, I'm just kidding.
Look, you made the dog mad. As the world searches for a cure to a devastating virus, a scientist and a park scout venture deep into the woods. As night falls, their journey becomes a terrifying voyage through the heart of darkness as the forest comes to life around them. Slightly misleading.
Yeah, I mean,
last phrase there.
that kind of.
Slightly misleading.
I think you read that synopsis and you're like, oh, like Evil Dead, but it's not like that.
Right, or the plants are evil or
Right.
something. You think you're going to watch Annihilation all over again.
To be fair, there is more. This probably skews closer to M. Night Shyamalan's The Happening, but more happens in this than in The Happening, which is still one of the more baffling movies I've ever seen.
movie.
Yeah.
Well, Clay, some things you'll find in the Earth include that one guy from your college dorm with an acoustic guitar.
Yep. Who, I never had one of those. Okay, technically that's not true. There was.
Were you that guy?
No, I wasn't.
Okay, good.
There was a guy who went to my school who was, I don't know what his major was. I went to art school. I don't know what his major was. I never saw him in a class. The only place I ever saw him was in like the quad area outside. And he was this little skinny short Asian man with big sideburns who constantly wore cowboy boots and carried like a single rose with him.
Oh my God.
And I always saw him with a guitar.
He sounds like he's straight out of a David Lynch movie.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Basically, yes.
I would not be able to. I would be like, all right, fine. Tell me what it is.
Yeah.
What's going on?
I was prepared to just assume that he didn't actually exist.
You were hallucinating
Like after
him?
I left, I was like, well, that guy, That guy probably was not he was just a tulpa or something. But no, a friend of mine still knows him and is kind of tangentially in touch. I don't know if he still has the guitar and the rose though.
Perfect man, perfect story. You'll also find animal ? Guts used as surgical thread.
Yeah, that's a fun late movie reveal because when they pull it out at the beginning, I thought it was like twine.
Yeah, you were like, real bad idea to use your like tactical paracord as like sutures.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yes, it seems to be some sort of gut.
Yeah, I'm guessing it was people.
Probably.
People gut.
Especially based on that corpse that he finds with the stomach cut open
gut.
later. But yeah.
You'll also find fashionable tarp couture outfits.
He did a lot with what he had.
Yeah, I mean, very creative.
Yeah, he made based on those pictures, those look like period accurate costumes they were wearing.
Yeah.
But they seem to just be tarps that he painted white and then wrapped around people with a...
Look, he had a really successful booth at the flea market before the apocalypse happened.
He could have made with all those like head things, dresses he made for those pictures, he could have cleaned up in the parking lot behind Showcase Cinemas in Revere.
Perfect. Yeah. You'll also find Martin's, quote, special flesh.
I missed that line, but that's an interesting...
Olivia tells him that he has quite special flesh.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And, of course, quote, a lot of information to keep track of, end quote.
Yes. Weirdly about this movie.
Yes.
And I don't know if that's probably too deep into the swing of things to start off with, but just generally.
Yeah.
I really liked this movie, but I do feel like it goes from delightfully abstract to way too much technobabble, and then goes back to even more abstract than it was the first time.
Almost a little too abstract.
Almost a little too abstract.
Almost,
yes.
Yeah. I think I maybe had a slightly different experience because this movie is kind of in the vein of many other things that I enjoy.
Sure.
I don't know if you ever read Jeff Vandermeer's Southern Reach trilogy.
I have not.
Did you see the movie with Natalie Portman that Alex Garland directed called Annihilation?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
That was based off of that book.
Gotcha.
That's very much in this vein.
Yeah, I actually, when it started, I thought it was very similar to Annihilation, even down to isn't Natalie Portman's character somehow romantically connected to Oscar Isaac in that, or like it's the same idea where it's like he's someone from her life that she's trying to find in the
it's so the basic premise. We'll start with the basic premise of Annihilation is that there is an area that the government knows about, that there are some bizarre phenomena happening. And they keep sending in, essentially, sometimes they've tried military scouting teams. They've gotten to the point now where they're sending in scientists.
Sure.
Natalie Portman's husband, Oscar Isaac, is one of the military teams. She goes later to figure out what the hell happened to him in there.
Right.
In one of the scientific teams. So it's a little more structured. It's a little more like you've got like institutional backing and like structures around things. This movie's plot is there's a global pandemic happening. And during this pandemic, this scientist, Martin, has come to, he has been corresponding with another scientist. He has come to assist her in her field research.
Right.
It's much more contained. It's much smaller.
Right.
Just like a couple people who want to dig around in the dirt.
But we find out later that he did have a relationship with her, though, right?
Yes.
Because he didn't know about her ex-husband and stuff.
Right. It's he doesn't outrightly say it, but Alma says stuff and he doesn't correct her. That when they used to work together, they were in some kind of relationship.
Right.
Yes.
But yeah, you mentioned the global pandemic. This was made in Ben Wheatley wrote it very early on in the first COVID lockdown, and then they shot it very quickly, I think, last year. So I think they shot it in 2021 even, or maybe... I'm not sure when that piece of trivia I was reading was, so let's say it was shot somewhere in 2020, early 2021.
Yeah.
And this is I believe this is the first COVID movie we've watched.
I I think so, and I will. Before we kind of get into it, I will say I'm kind of glad we're doing it now.
Yes.
Not to say that like, oh, COVID's done and we're all fine. Obviously not true, but I feel like life is approximating normal enough for most people that I feel like I can look at this as a time that has passed and not a thing that we're fully in the midst of anymore.
Well, it's funny.
Like the quarantine lockdown, you haven't seen new people in 8 months or whatever.
It's funny because I at least for me, when we watched Wreck, that was like grossly triggering for me, and it was part of one of the reasons why I didn't like Wreck that much.
Interesting.
Was because we had been in the depths of watching idiots not listening to
like scientific experts
and people continuing to get sick and this thing spreading and stuff, and it was just very frustrating to watch. But that's a very different vibe than this.
Yeah.
And I would be curious how this would have played right in the pocket of the pandemic, because I think what's really interesting about this movie is the pandemic aspect is important, but it's not essential to the story.
Yeah.
It's really kind of like this sort of general framing device that kind of gives you an inroad to what's going on.
Yeah.
Because the stuff that this movie, at least the stuff I was pulling out of it, that it's kind of talking about is very much stuff born from all of our experiences in the past couple of years. Mm-hmm. But it's what you're actually being shown is extrapolated out to extremes. So like at a certain point when we were watching this, I said to you, I was like, oh, the horror of this movie is the horror of sanitation.
Yes.
Because so much of it is like cleaning yourself.
And being afraid of infection.
Right.
Like whether it's germs infection in terms of like this virus or Martin's extremely wounded foot.
Right.
Like everybody being very concerned that it's infected or it's going to get infected or what happens when you're infected or all of this different stuff.
And the other side of that is it's all about microbes and stuff that you end up breathing in and getting up into your nose and body and stuff and starts fucking with you. And it's not like I didn't find it to be so much of a direct one-to-one that I thought it was hacky or anything.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There's an interesting, so when the movie starts, you kind of start with Martin arriving at this nature preserve and getting to the lodge. And there's sort of almost this like pandemic theater that happens in front of you.
Right.
Where there's like a gate, even though there's no one around, there's like a gate he has to stop at. And they come out in like one guy comes out in like a full hazmat thing and they literally just spray him down with disinfectant. Mm-hmm. They take a blood sample to make sure he's not sick. They have to do all of these steps to make sure that he's not infected with something and bringing a disease into their little community.
Right.
And then we kind of meet like the characters at the lodge, and then we meet Alma, and then they go out into the woods, and there's this sequence when they're first out in the woods together where he is really struggling. Mm-hmm. Like he's very out of shape.
Yep. He's
having a real hard time. He's carrying a big backpack, but he's not like so laden down that he should be as exhausted as he is, and he starts like coughing, and he sneezes a few times, and you see Alma's face kind of get more and more like, oh god damn it, god damn it. And like it's this great thing because it sets you up at the very beginning that you think the virus is going to be the problem, and then it's not. He's not sick. He just he had been in isolation for 4 months, and he hadn't exercised, and he was just really out of shape.
Right.
That was it. So I kind of loved that. Like I loved that it sort of registered the virus and the pandemic not only just as like a plot device to create this setting, it also does kind of trickle into the story as like a potential threat. Mm-hmm. But then it's really like you're saying, it's not really the point. Like the virus that they're talking about going through cities and they talk about how people in the village have died and all of this, that ends up not being what they have to grapple with, and they seem like they're prepared to grapple with that and like nothing else. Yeah,
and I actually was a little bit confused at a certain point because I think the nature of this movie and the nature of my current state of my hearing abilities, added on to the accents that people it wasn't incomprehensible or anything, but like they talk kind of low and quiet, and so I didn't I couldn't parse out whether or not the pandemic had anything directly to do with what they were doing. Like, I didn't know if the reason they were doing this was to hopefully find a cure or something. I don't think it is.
No, it's not.
I think it's just like there happens to be a pandemic happening.
Yes.
Which I kind of really prefer.
Yeah.
Because, as we were saying, like, it takes all of those elements that come along with the pandemic and applies them to this separate story. Like you were saying, like with the sanitation thing, it uses it to grow false worry about this thing as the and it also and the isolation of it too.
Yeah, it kind of explains why a lot of the characters might be coming off as really weird.
Yeah
Like why they're staying, like when you first come across, so when Alma and Martin are first kind of on their hike, they come across a tent, like an abandoned camp, and Alma's not surprised. She's sad. She's kind of upset by it, but she tells Martin, I've seen this before. People come out of the towns and the cities. They come out here to escape the virus. They get sick anyway, and they don't make it.
Right.
And then you meet pretty soon after that, like they get attacked in the night, the first night sleeping out in the woods.
Tent thieves.
Tent thieves come, steal their shoes. Yep. Martin injures his foot the next morning, and they meet Zach. And it does kind of like, in any other movie, the minute they met Zach, you'd be like, oh shit, creepy, crazy woodland hobo. Guys, what are you doing? Run away.
Right.
And in this movie, instead, you're like, okay, we know there's this pandemic happening in the wider world. So yeah, it kind of makes sense that somebody might say, fuck it, I have enough skills and enough equipment. I'm just going to go live in the woods. I don't want to risk dying. I'm going to wait for this to blow over. I mean, it's an extreme example of like how many people do you know? And like my husband and I were guilty of this too, of thinking like, well, fuck, I got to move out of the city.
Oh yeah, sure.
Like gotta buy some land in Maine somewhere and get the hell out of here.
That's why everything is so fucking expensive now.
Exactly. But like people really did do that. Like that was that was a legitimate response to the threat of illness. And so it means that Zach right away is like disheveled and kind of creepy, but it leaves you with that little bit of doubt of whether or not he's actually crazy.
Right.
At least at first.
Yeah. The other thing that I thought was pretty clever, it's interesting because I found this ultimately clever when I thought about it after the fact. But as it was happening, I found it a little bit jarring. Which was, the structure is fairly clever, going off of what you're saying about Zach and not immediately thinking he's a threat.
Yeah.
They set this up as they're kind of on almost like an Apocalypse Now type mission where they're searching for this one doctor who no one has heard from in a long time.
Yep.
And so like that's the thing they're kind of going towards. And until Zach turns on them, you don't even really know what this movie is about. Or like what the danger of this movie is.
Yeah.
There's some talk of the woodland spirit called
Parnag Feg.
There we go. Which, so you're like, okay, some sort of, either it's going to be about crazy people or they're actually going to show you a wood demon. But,
right. There's either supernatural evil or maybe a crazy cult.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you're kind of going into the woods with these two with a couple things that are going at the same time. Whereas is it going to be the pandemic thing?
Right.
Is it going to be this monster? Is it going to be this scientist they're going to find and ends up being a weird tweaker or whatever? And then you end up running into Zach, who, like, in any other movie, you're immediately like, that guy is clearly bad.
Yeah.
But it doesn't play that way immediately, but then eventually it does.
Right. Yeah.
But then the thing that was kind of jarring to me is that after the whole sequence with Zach, then you get to the sequence with the hell's the scientist's name?
Olivia Wendell.
With Olivia Wendell, and then it kind of turns into a different movie for a bit.
Yeah.
And I found it really jarring because it I just wasn't expecting that kind of turn, and it made it feel like they kind of ran out of story, and so they constructed this other half. But I think they
Interesting.
I think they ended up blending it together pretty well.
Yeah. So I think it's almost giving you a chance to see two sides of the same coin.
Sure. Yeah.
Because when they're with Zach, it's sort of like the whole time they're with him, I don't know, and you're not supposed to, I don't think, know how long they're actually held captive by Zach.
Right. Could be a while.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It could be days. It could be however long.
He took a lot of pictures that he developed by himself. So
Yes, and he had to dress them and undress them in their tarp couture.
right.
So lugging bodies around, sounds exhausting.
I was thinking that actually. I was like, Jesus, the amount of time it would take
Yeah.
for him to do this.
Yeah, like Alma's a pretty petite woman, but like Martin's a tall guy.
Yeah,
he's
he's a big
skinny,
dude.
but he's tall.
Yeah.
And Zach's alone and he's been living in the woods. I can't imagine that his diet has been super great, that
Yeah,
he's
good
in like
point.
the best shape of his life, but maybe he is. Maybe Parnag Feg provides. But the whole time they're with Zach, it's sort of like, so he's drugging them to keep them mostly, or if not completely, unconscious, so he can stage them in the ways he wants. And he's cutting into Martin and sewing runes into his skin,
Right.
using the questionable animal gut string. And the whole time we see them, we don't often actually see them. There's a couple, like, there's a little, like, montage where we see them in the tarp outfits, like, outside. But other than that, it's, like, a very claustrophobic sequence.
Oh,
like,
yeah,
they're
yeah.
inside the shelter structure, which is just, like, tents made out of tarps, essentially. Like, it's very, like, they're never fully out in the open. They're always tied up. They're covered in, like, just covered in tarps themselves, like, pinned to the ground, pretty much. And it's always like rainy and kind of gray and dreary.
Yeah. That alone made me think everything in this movie is going to get infected because it's a very wet period of
Fetid.
year. Yeah.
And then when they're with Olivia, it's very different. Her camp is set up in a big clearing.
Yep.
It's
Multiple tents spread out.
Exactly, very open. It's brighter. It's like a lot brighter. We see them just sort of like wandering outside a lot more. So I liked the visual like disconnect between the two because I think it was kind of trying to get at this like these two people are trying for the same goal and approaching it from opposite sides.
Yeah.
Where Zach is going old school worship, ritual, mythology or theology, whereas Olivia's trying to come at it with some level of like organization and structure and like scientific inquiry.
Yeah.
But they both ultimately are like doing the same thing.
Right. Yeah.
Being crazy in the woods.
Yeah. After it was over and I thought about it, I liked it a lot more.
Yeah.
But yeah, just in the moment, I found it very jarring. And
it is like a weirdly like it's a disorienting movie. And
yes, very much so.
And I think it's very intentional.
Yeah.
Like there's lots of sequences. It's really beautiful.
Oh, it's
too.
gorgeously shot.
It's like a lovely movie to just like see, other than the gruesome parts.
Yeah, we could talk about that in a minute.
Yeah,
but yeah,
but like there's all these like moments of quiet in the woods. There's a moment where they're at Zach's camp and it's raining and the rain is in slow motion and it's like very like beautiful and there's all these different sort of like sequences where they're being affected by the spores of the mushrooms and like they're seeing kind of colors and shapes and like there's just a lot of jarring sequences of like sounds and flashing lights. It's really, I think, really interesting all the different ways in which this movie sets out to disorient the watcher. Both the obvious ones, like Dr. Wendell's setup with the strobe lights and the loud sounds is like obviously disorienting. But even the fact that like when I first started watching the movie, there are really abrupt cuts. And I found them really weird initially because it would just be like, Martin and Alma would be having a conversation and Alma would be like, well, what's that all about? And Martin would be like, it's private. And then it would just cut to black, next scene.
Right.
No transition, nothing fancy to sort of smooth you into it. And at first I was kind of like, well, this was made during the pandemic. Maybe they didn't have like the time or the resources to like fix those transitions. And then I realized it's on purpose.
Yeah.
It's because they don't like, the movie doesn't want you to know how much time has passed or like where exactly we are in the progress of this journey.
Yeah. Even, you know, I think when you're talking about the claustrophobic nature of the tent setup that Zach has, even that is also very disorienting because it's so many hanging tarps that move into different rooms.
And they're all like colors.
Yeah.
So there's like a red reflection in the background, but their faces have like a greenish tint, so they're facing something else. It's
There's you can't really get a good sense of how big this little shanty town is. There's also, you know, I don't know if I would call this a disorienting choice, but it was an interesting choice when they first meet Zach.
Yeah.
For some reason, it stood out to me that when it's Alma and Zach talking to each other, they shoot them both in extreme close-up, which, because in my head, I was like, I'm surprised they're not shooting this at more of a long shot because to emphasize the social distancing aspect where it's like you've met this person in the woods, you're not going to come close to them because of what's going on. I mean, she doesn't know what the fuck if he's been tested or whatever.
Yeah.
But they shoot it very close up that makes them feel very close together. And I just thought it was an odd choice. I don't think it was bad. I actually think it was really interesting. But it was, I found it kind of disorienting that in this setup about the situation where people are clearly sick and whatever, they are visually giving you this indicator that these people are just like very close together.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that does add to the whole like the overall like kind of you're supposed to feel uncertain all the time.
Yeah.
About like literally where you stand, but also figuratively where you stand with people.
I also wonder if it was a way to disarm Zach a little bit for the viewer, because if you continue to shoot him in long shot, it feels more standoffish.
Yeah.
And a little bit more suspicious.
That's true.
But if you get right up there and get his face right in, you know.
Right, yeah, then he's just like kind of an old guy with long hair.
Yeah.
You know, like he's just a dude. He doesn't look, you know, you can't see that he's got like, you know, dirty hands or he's holding a hammer or something. Like he doesn't look, you can't read his posture and try to look for anything threatening. It's just his face.
Right. I do think to jump back to the COVID analog briefly, probably my favorite moment of that, which felt very relatable and on the nose, was after, what's the guy's name? The main guy. Martin. The nice flesh.
Special Clay.
Special flesh. When Martin finally escapes and he makes it to so it's nighttime, he's running on with a half amputated foot through
we gotta talk about that.
Yeah, we will. Don't worry. Through the wilderness, and like there's strobe lights going off, and he comes up to the line of Olivia's camp, and she comes out with like the full hazmat suit.
Yep.
The thing that I found so like triggering as far as remembering pandemic stuff is the very first thing he's freaking out because someone's trying to kill him.
Yep.
And she stops him so she can swab his nose.
Yes. Yeah, she essentially just sticks a giant Q-tip right up in there immediately.
Yeah, it's like you can't, not even in this situation can you come into a building without a proof of vaccination.
Back the fuck up.
Yeah, it was really it's just one of those things where it's like, obviously I've never been in that situation that dire.
Yeah.
But it does bring to mind how constantly this stuff was. It still is, but not as much as it was. It was constant.
Yeah,
where it was, you can't do anything. You got to make sure, put the thing up your nose.
I mean, I think we all remember like lining up outside of grocery stores to go in with like a 6-foot distance in between you and the next person, and being like let in one at a time, and the attendant at the door pumping disinfectant into your hands and being like, you have to let me spray your hands, you have to let me do whatever. Like, yeah, we kind of all had to do that for so long that it's interesting because there's a moment where early on Alma and Martin are talking about the whole pandemic thing, and Alma's like, people will forget. We'll go back to normal. People will go back to the same old. People will forget. And Martin's like, I don't think anyone's going to forget this. And it's so interesting being like a year or two out from that level of intensity and seeing how easy it is to slip back.
Oh, totally. I was
You know?
actually wondering, like, not even for people. At first, I was thinking about people who maybe were too young to really remember what happened, but I don't even think that matters. Do you think that if people will watch this movie, like in say 5 years, will totally appreciate? Like, do you think it will have the same resonance? Because I feel like so much of the pandemic stuff is kind of subtextual in this that I don't know if it will really register that, oh, they made this movie during the pandemic.
You know, I think in 5 years people will.
Yeah.
I think if you're talking more like 10, 15 or more, then it's going to get interesting.
Yeah.
I think it's really going to depend on like how old were you when all this was happening? Where did you live?
Right.
Because I do think that, like, you know, we live outside of a major city in the United States. Knowing other people who lived in or around major cities in the U.S., we had COVID protocols and lockdowns that were much more strenuous and rigorous than people I know who lived in like the suburbs or more rural areas where there just wasn't a need. Like, you're not dealing with the same density. You weren't dealing with the big outbreaks. So I think it's really going to depend, because I think if you were somebody who lived in New York City in 2020, 2021, and you watch this movie 20 years from now, you're probably going to go, oh, wow, that brings back memories. Holy shit.
Yeah.
But if you were like, you know, 6 years old and you lived in like, you know, a rural area in Kansas or something, you're just going to be like, all right, that's weird. Why are they like, you know.
Now, do you think it's still, I guess I would preface this by saying, do you think that this movie works generally?
Generally, or in specific in the pandemic
Just
stuff?
generally for the moment.
Yeah, generally I think it works.
Do you think it still works without that?
Like if you were one of the people who didn't have that kind of resonance?
If you didn't have the direct connection to everything that we went through and that this is sort of indirectly or directly commenting on, does it work as well for you? Does it still hold up?
You know, I think it will. Because I mean, look at we've had movies about contagions and outbreaks since we've had movies. Essentially, like it's a perennial fear for humanity. Like everyone has gotten sick at some point, even if it's just a really bad cold.
Right.
And the fear of getting sick with something worse, it reemerges every now and again. We learn about the bubonic plague in school. We hear about Ebola outbreaks in Africa. We get told about bird flu or, you know, Zika. Like, these things are...
Monkeypox.
That
like, one sounds fun.
But, like, as long as we, you know, live in close contact with the natural world, these things come up.
Right.
And so even if you don't have a direct experience of it, you understand the shorthand. Like, we've seen enough zombie movies. We've seen 28 Days Later where they talk about the infected and the, you know, that we're cut off, we're quarantined, blah, blah, blah. I think it might erase some of the more subtle concerns around the very concept of what does it mean to be infected with something.
Sure.
But I still think the movie would work.
Yeah. Man, I had a follow-up for that. Now it's gone.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
I went too long. I could talk about this movie all day.
Yeah, damn it. I know it's going to come back to me in the middle of another thought.
Yeah,
so
we'll get to it.
But yeah, this is. I think this is a very stressful movie.
Yes.
It is expertly stressful.
Which is strange for a movie that has some sequences that are just so beautiful that I would put on YouTube on a loop in the background while I worked.
Some pretty good screensaver stuff.
Yeah, seriously. But it is so anxiety inducing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's Ben Wheatley knows that he's got you in these different scenes.
Yeah.
And it has such a interesting and great use of gore, I think.
Yeah.
And it was really kind of unexpected to me. And what's so great about it is it rides that the sweet spot for me in these movies of, depending on your state of mind at the time, which may actually change through the course of watching the movie, it can swing from really funny to really horrific.
Yes.
Because there's like some shit in this where, for instance, when he cuts his foot, when you finally see that cut on his foot, right?
Oh, and it's a big gash.
It's a huge cut.
On the bottom of his foot, and his skin is like hanging off of his foot.
He reacts in the moment when he cuts himself as though he just like stepped on a hard rock.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't look like someone sliced his foot open.
Right. He doesn't fall down screaming.
Right.
Yeah.
But when you finally see it, it's this disgusting gash
it's real
with
gross.
flappy skin.
Ugh.
And then Zach starts sewing it up with this. He's like, "Oh, don't worry, I've done this before." And starts
on myself.
Starts sewing it up with what at the time it looked like it was just like camping twine or something, and it's a horrible, horrible job.
Yeah.
But like in the moment, you're just going like, "Oh my god!" But at this,
and there's a couple of moments where Martin, like when the camera first shows his foot, he's like, "How is it? Tell me how it is. What is it okay?" And Alma's like, "It's fine. It's not that bad."
Yeah. And like there's another kind of side to that, which is deeply darkly funny.
Yeah.
And I think that side comes out more at the end when Zach gets killed.
Oh my god, yes.
When he gets the thing in the eye,
yes.
and then he holds up the mirror.
Alma uses a tent stake.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
She rips out of the ground, and when he's attacking her, and stabs him right in the eye.
Yeah.
And it's a funny callback to when he has Alma and Martin hostage, and he has sewn up Martin's foot, but also been drugging them and taking ritualistic pictures of them in their tarp couture. He looks at the foot at Martin's foot and says, "Oh, this is infected. You've got two choices. I can either take you to a hospital, but I think that'll take too long, so I'm gonna have to amputate." And he's like, and then there's this whole, oh my god, there's this whole back and forth where Martin's like, no, it's fine, thank you very much. I really, I like it the way it is. It's good the way it is. It hurts, but I'm fine. It's good. And like the whole axe swinging thing. But then when Zach gets stabbed in the eye, he looks in the mirror and the first thing he says is, "You have to take me to a hospital."
Yeah. Well, and he says it in such like a dryly comic way where he's freaking out, and then he looks at the mirror and he goes, "Well, that isn't going to do. You need to take me to the hospital." And then she, pushes it through the back of his head. But like,
so good.
There's so much of it that reads both ways. Like you mentioned the amputation scene, which is so, it's like textbook tension and stress building.
Yes.
It does something really great that I don't think movies do enough, that Tom Savini talked about, where he thinks of prosthetic special effects kind of like magic tricks to a certain point. And so he was talking about one of the things you have to do if you have a character who's got a bladed weapon who's going to cut someone's arm off or something. Yeah. You need to show how actually devastating that thing is. So the trick is he swings it the first time and he misses, but the thing goes into a tree, and you see how deep it sticks into the tree. So now oh, that's a real thing. Yeah. So then when he hits him, even though it's a fake effect, you already have that in your mind that that's a real weapon.
Right. It's like primed you for that moment.
Yeah. And so they do that in this, where he keeps swinging the axe and hitting the stump.
Practice swings.
Yeah. Like just inches from the foot. So you're seeing the thing just go deep into the stump.
Yeah.
And then he finally gets he hits the toes, and it's just that stuff. It was the first time I've seen a scene like that where it legitimately worked on me. Yeah. Like, I feel like they took the time to make that gore gag work. Yes. Where I feel like most other movies would just lean on the fact that, oh, he's getting his toes cut off.
Right.
Isn't that gross?
Right.
Isn't that intense?
It would be more about the sort of screaming aftermath than the lead up in a weird way. And I think the fact that the movie, despite Martin having sliced his foot open before then, the movie up until that point, and you're probably about almost halfway through the movie at that point, it's been tense. But it's been almost like nightmarish in the sense of like having a nightmare.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
like
sure.
dreamlike and sort of disconnected and disjointed and like weirdly beautiful at times and weirdly calm, or like you see the scenes of Zach drugging them forcibly, but it's the soundtrack sort of takes precedence. You don't hear them struggling. It's sort of in like a light slow-mo. This is kind of the first time in a while with the characters that you feel really present again in the moment, and they really lean on that in the momentness of it. Like even having like Zach's just talking really matter-of-factly, like he has to do this favor for Martin.
Right.
And Martin is like also very, very upset, but trying to seem like he's still reasonable. Like he's being extremely British about it.
Yeah.
Where he just keeps being like, no, thank you. No, that's quite all right. I really appreciate it, but thank you, no.
It's also a situation too where like if you are that person who has no medical training, if you are Martin who has no medical training, you have no idea whether or not what he's saying is true.
And I don't think it is.
No, I'm sure it's not.
I don't think like amputating a couple toes. If the cut underneath his foot is infected, I don't think amputating a couple toes is going to do shit.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
And you know, your husband Greg mentioned it as we were watching it, but it reminded him and me of this moment where our friend Dave, who'd been on the Star Wars show, we were out with Dave celebrating, finding out he was having his second child.
Yes.
And he just randomly passed out.
Yeah.
And he fell in kind of, you know, there was maybe like 10 of us. He fell basically in between all of us and just kind of hit the ground hard. And everybody just kind of froze. First because we thought it was a joke at first, but he went down pretty hard.
Oof.
Yeah. But nobody knew what to do. And then someone came over and kind of pushed his way in and started taking control of the situation. And everybody there, to a person, just assumed this person knew what he was doing.
Yes.
We later found out he absolutely did not.
Yeah, isn't he just like a crazy person?
Yeah, we ended up talking to Dave later.
Did he like slip him a business card or some shit?
Yeah, we were like, man, so was that guy like an off-duty EMT or something? And Dave was just like, no, that guy was so weird. He sold cell phones and he put his card into my pocket while I was lying on the ground having hit my head after I fell.
My God.
And we were just like, oh, wow. Like we just, because when you're in that situation, as long as someone takes a step forward and starts like talking assertively.
Right.
You don't know whether or not what they're saying is true or scientifically accurate.
Yeah. Oh, God. Look, it could have been so much worse. He could have cut a bunch of Dave's toes off.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You all would have let him. I guess he needs it.
We would have sharpened the knife for him.
But there is something that keeps happening. Like, so obviously both Martin and Alma go through a lot physically in this movie. Martin especially, in terms of he gets his foot injured. He gets a bunch of his toes cut off. He then has to, when they finally get to Dr. Wendell's camp, she is like, let me take a look at your foot. Well, we're going to have to cauterize that. But the whole time, like all of this stuff is happening. Like when Martin first gets his foot sewn up by Zach, when he gets it cauterized later by Dr. Wendell, people keep making Alma like an accessory to torturing Martin.
Right.
Which I do think plays into this whole scenario in an interesting way the more I think about it. Because she's sent with him to guide him. She's sent with him to bring him safely to the camp. Because people get lost in this woods all the time. So her job, she's a park ranger, and her assignment is to take care of him, kind of. And early on, when he's like really struggling and seems like he may even be sick, she's kind of like leery of him, if not even a little annoyed.
Yes. Yeah.
And then later on, like she's the one who gets them out of Zach's clutches.
Right.
Like it is a team effort. Martin notices the blade that's fallen off of one of the tables. He tells Alma about it, and she's then able to get to it. But then like when they do escape from Zach starts chasing after her.
Right. And
Martin kind of just like lets it happen for a while. And then finally kind of yells, "Hey, over here," and like tries to draw him away. But it does I do think that like throughout this movie, it was surprising to me initially that Alma was so loyal to
Yeah,
Martin,
yeah.
a man she did not know, who kind of was the whole reason she was in this predicament in the first place.
Sure. Yeah.
And I realized later on that part of it might be that A, she feels a sense of professional responsibility, but also B, like, she has witnessed him suffer so much, and she has kind of aided and abetted some of that suffering. And I wonder if there isn't like a little bit of like something in all of this about like actually having to take care of one another in times of distress, because that is the only way they make it out of any of the problems they're in.
Well, it's interesting too, with that in mind, to talk about what happens at the very end, because my understanding, and I would like to back up a bit, but I think this makes sense to what we're talking about currently.
Yeah,
is that she becomes the avatar for the tree spirits or whatever.
Parnog Feg, you mean?
Yes.
I'm gonna keep saying it until you get it right. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if we're supposed to know.
Yeah. Well, but the reason I brought it up is because she is the one she's a park ranger.
Yep.
And she is someone who her role essentially through the story is a protector and caregiver.
Yep.
And she is the one who actually cares about the people and the earth, essentially.
Yeah.
And so, like, her being the one who ends up
chosen
to lead them out of the wilderness, literally.
Yeah.
Makes sense in that way, I think.
I think so too. Especially there's a moment. There's part of the time when they're with Zach, and then also part of the time when they're with Olivia, that it gets really talky.
Yes, I did. That was what I wanted to talk about next. Yeah. Yes.
Well, we can get into that because I'm kind of in it anyway. But there are some interesting things that come up in those conversations. Like those conversations are even like monologues, kind of.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff.
It's a lot of information to keep track of.
It is.
But there's something Zach says when he's talking to Alma, when he says to her, like, this is why, like, what are you doing here? To her. And he kind of says it a couple times, like, more emphatically. And then she's like, my job.
Right.
And he was like, so you came out here to take care of the forest. Like, he addresses that almost directly, that like she came here for a reason, because she wanted to be closer to nature. And I think that is a really interesting read of it, that drive in her makes her more well suited to being, like, I don't know, chosen by this power.
Yeah, it is. I think the power. So getting into that middle section where they make it to the camp, it kind of made my eyes gloss over a little bit, because it was so much information, so much technical information that it wasn't really landing with me. I mean, you pull out a magic book, I'm with you the whole way.
Yeah.
But like,
that was probably one of the smartest things Olivia did to keep Clay's interest.
Yes.
Is she whipped out the ancient magic book.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I do appreciate that the magic book sequence is part and parcel to a scientific explanation sequence.
Yes.
Which is kind of funny, because it is sort of like the first indicator that she and Zach are working together. Because it's like, well, why does she have the magic book?
Right. Why didn't he take the magic book with him?
Yeah, I mean,
since he's out there posing people in arcane positions. Right.
They're presenting these two disparate elements as working together. You can probably extrapolate that out to the characters who represent these things. But yeah, what was your read? First of all,
yes.
Can you explain to me what the hell they were talking about?
what Dr. Wendell is talking about?
Like, because they get so deep into the weeds of what she's trying to do.
It's funny that you use that phrase, deep into the weeds.
When she's out there playing her synthesizers.
That was amazing. I love it.
But like, I wasn't it just wasn't clicking with me what they were trying to do.
So she was researching a real thing called a mycorrhizal mat, or mycorrhizal network.
Okay.
it's essentially like a fungal network, because like fungus is like a lot of like people will say it almost kind of resembles a brain. So it can kind of process stimuli from different parts of other fungus nearby and other plant life nearby. And so these networks build out almost like neural networks where they are all kind of in touch, and almost talking to each other is not the right word, but you get what I'm saying.
Sure. Yeah.
So she was researching this particular fungal network that she believed was sentient, and that it might stretch even further than they thought, and it might have needs and desires and fears. Like it might be essentially the earth a piece of the earth, a piece of nature trying to protect itself, protect its environment. I think she even kind of goes into this, like, it's worried about the same things any animal or person would worry about. It's worried about food and shelter and sustaining itself. And so that's kind of the thing that she's researching is this like series of interconnected plant life and fungus. That's where the sort of the ringworm thing comes from.
Sure.
Because ringworm is a fungal infection. So I think the implication with that was that this mycorrhizal mat does reach further than they realized, and it infected, it's like chosen people to infect, to bring in for its purposes.
Okay. And where,
helpful at all?
Yes. Where does that cross over with the more magic book element in Parnog
Theg?
Parnog Theg.
She thinks essentially
Director of the movie Bridesmaids.
I thought you were going to say of Censor.
Oh no. Yes. That Prano Bailey Bond. Yes.
Yeah.
That's it's a
right.
pretty good
Come
one.
on. So I think she is saying that this mycorrhizal network is what Zach calls Parnog Theg.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's where the legend has come from. These visions people have been given by the spore clouds that are being generated up from it. That this thing is essentially its own creature with its own intent, and that's where the legends and the sort of like folklore and like pseudo religious texts have all come up from, a pre-scientific attempt to understand this scientific phenomenon.
Yes. Yeah, and what I really liked about that stuff is that I feel like when you do these kinds of things in a modern setting, there's always this tendency or desire to discount one of the options as being wrong.
Yeah.
So it's like
which one was it really?
Right. It's
Yeah.
either like you get into things and it's like, wait a minute, science doesn't apply to this at all. It's all magic. Or the other way where it's like that the magic book has been fake the whole time. It's actually a scientific phenomenon. Very rarely, I feel, do they find a way to blend the two together in a way that is satisfying.
Yeah.
And I think this movie does a really good job of that.
I do too, because it's the thing about Wendell's research is based on a real thing. Like these networks really exist. Like scientists really study them. They really have been proven. Like, this fungus can kind of sense what's going on over here with these other plants, and when these plants have been damaged, and like what to do, like how to compensate for different things in the environment. Like that's all real. So it's really interesting.
Tell each other when there's a cop speed trap set up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
It's essentially like fungus, the fungus version of Waze. Yeah. But so I think it's really interesting to take that real and fascinating and kind of still vaguely mysterious phenomenon, like that's a real thing, and then sort of kind of extrapolate back, like what would people have thought about this if they had discovered some sort of evidence of it, but it was like, I don't know, the year 500.
Right. Yeah.
Like, how would people back then have processed this? It absolutely would have been folklore and spirits.
Yep.
And turned into this legend.
Well, they dropped that line. There's an Arthur C. Clarke line. They paraphrase it. I don't know if it's Clarke. It's one of those guys. Where they say, for an undeveloped culture, any advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Yeah.
You know, so...
Yeah. Yeah, the roadside picnic, if you will.
But yeah, what I really like about it is that it is... while what she's doing is okay, so basically I'm a huge fan of science.
Good,
Let me
great,
just
great,
put
great.
that out there.
And
Big fan.
so you don't believe in
Name it. Vaccines, the round of Earth.
the round of Earth.
The round, you know. I'm not going to use scientific terms, Amanda, because I don't believe in those things.
Got it. Okay. Clay's new podcast, The Round of Earth.
It's a flat circle. It's not a globe. It's
like
still
time.
round. But one of the things that always bums me out is when, and I feel like there's two kinds of people. There's people who are bummed out by this, and there are people who really like this, and it's when you find out scientific explanations for things that are more supernatural. Or
Got it.
So, for instance, like. I will admit this one's pretty cool, but it still bummed me out a little bit. I was watching a show about like haunted houses or something, and they were talking about how this one specific, it's an old house, one specific place in this building. Every time you walk through there, you get this really overcome with this feeling of dread, and people are like, "Oh, it's clearly ghosts."
Oh.
They actually did a study. I don't know what that consisted of, and realized it was actually a broken air conditioning system. Because the broken air conditioner was transmitting sound at a frequency that was the same frequency as the roar of a lion.
I was going to ask if it was a sound thing.
Yes, which is a sound that apparently is like instinctually fills you with dread and fear.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's like that on the one hand is super cool.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I mean,
Like-
I would have preferred a ghost
Right.
personally. Or like they I've heard people talk about a lot of ghost sightings and ghost stories became popular in the 1800s, around the time where they started putting natural gas into these houses for lamps and stuff. And so there was a theory that a lot of spectral sightings was due to leaky gas pipes.
Yeah.
Maybe people were breathing in a little bit too much natural gas in
Sure.
their old creaky Victorian mansions. So, it's like which is kind of cool, but at the same time it's like, would I prefer to not know if Bigfoot is out there than to know that Bigfoot is something that is kind of less cool?
Right.
I would prefer
Yeah.
to assume that the Loch Ness Monster exists instead of finding out that it's just like a big catfish that got stuck on a log once.
Right. A weird sea snake that they got a picture of a weird angle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what I like about this is they don't take those things off the board because
Right. They don't make you choose.
Right, because
Yeah.
they make the natural phenomenon inexplainable within the bounds of science.
Yes.
And which doesn't completely discount it as being something supernatural.
Right, because just because we know that we know in a very basic way that okay, this thing exists and we're calling it by this scientific name doesn't mean that we understand everything about it.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that it couldn't be more than what we are aware it is thus far. Like I like that too. I really like that kind of stuff that it leaves it like open to not it just being like, well, yeah, it's like everybody just breathed in this weird gas and they hallucinated and it's all over.
Right. Yeah. I mean, when the gas thing happens, like this cloud of fungal spores surrounds their camp.
Yep.
And
Olivia.
Nope, the other one.
Alma.
God, there's 4 people in this movie.
Yep.
I can't remember their freaking names. When she tries to
she puts on the
leave.
hazmat suit and the face mask and everything that's supposed to filter out particles, but the particles are too small.
Yeah.
And so she has...
And she tries to walk through this cloud of spores, and this cloud of spores basically stops her from leaving.
Yeah.
Which they kind of have an explanation for, but also kind of don't. And especially when she ends up at the end possibly being the avatar for whatever this thing is.
Right.
now it seems like it was something that was it just hyper potent spores, or
Right.
was it something that was actually keeping her there because it had a plan for her?
Right. So at the very end, you're sort of left with the question of, has something infected Alma, or is Martin still hallucinating from breathing in the spores himself?
Sure. Yeah.
So like you could go either way, and I think you can argue either one, and they'd be equally valid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. Was there anything you wanted to else we wanted to hit before we round out? You know, like the round of the earth.
I honestly, I could talk about this forever. I could talk about like other like fiction and novels and podcasts and what have you that sort of vaguely touch on this. I don't know if you ever listened to Tanis.
I did.
Yeah. There's a lot of overlap.
Did I like that? I don't remember if I liked that.
I liked it a lot when I listened to it, but I listened to it legitimately like 6 years ago.
Yeah,
So-
I think I listened to that one. That's kind of like a Limetown type show, right?
Yes.
I think I listened to that around the same time as Limetown, and I think I liked Tanis more than Limetown.
Yeah. Because Tanis was interesting in that it brought in a bunch of sort of like online conspiracy theories and like internet fascinations. It brought in a lot of that stuff with a lot of like other sort of like modern urban legends and folklore, and sort of built up around this like area in the Pacific Northwest in the woods that very much resembles this woods in this movie. And so it's like, yeah, if you liked this movie, I'd say, go listen to Tanis. You might enjoy that. But like, I'm a big fan of this kind of subgenre of like folk horror.
Yeah,
where it's
I love this stuff.
Creepy nature shit and could be science, but probably not.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the more successful modern takes on folk horror that I've seen, because usually I feel like they end up falling back into, well, it's it's a monster.
Right, or it's a cult,
Yeah.
and they're crazy, and they're just doing crazy cult stuff.
Yeah, is it a monster or is it just the cult? It's like, well, those
Right.
are your options. That's kind of the same thing.
Yeah,
Whereas
and
this gives you a little bit more ambiguity, a much broader spectrum of things that could be going on.
right, and it does draw on actual like folklore and
Yeah.
folk religions from the area that it's shot in. Like runes and standing stones are all real things you will find all over the UK and parts of Europe. Like, so it's interesting watching these two things that exist in our real world, the scientific research and the kind of ancient religious rites kind of woven together into this. I really liked it.
Yeah, and one of the pieces of trivia that I found on IMDb, so I'm going to assume this is real. It says the research station is called ATU 327A. This is derived from the Arne Thompson Uther Index, the ATU Index, a catalog of folktale types used in folklore.
Yeah.
Index number ATU 327A is called, quote, "The Children and the Witch," which is the story of Hansel and Gretel, what the story of Hansel and Gretel is classified as. The ATU listing reads: "The parents abandon their children in the wood, the gingerbread house, the boy fattened, the witch thrown into the oven, the children acquire her treasure."
Yep.
Which is more or less the same kind of story as this.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually really true.
They
Cool.
don't mention feet chopping, though. Which, man, it's so difficult to get that tone right. And like, that foot chopping scene
Yes.
could have been a scene from Peacemaker.
Yeah, I think
Like-
I jokingly referred to it as like a Flight of the Conchords meets Saw.
Yeah, there is a scene, if I remember correctly, there is a scene very similar to that in Peacemaker.
Oh yeah,
With,
doesn't Adrian
Yeah, he keeps getting shot in the foot or something.
Vigilante gets his toes cut off
Yes.
when the alien?
Yeah,
they're
it's
in
like-
they're in the cave in the basement. Yeah.
It's a very similar vibe.
Yes.
Or very similar.
It's a little less jokey. Like I think
Yeah.
it's played in the Earth. It's a little less for laughs. It's a little more tense because none of these people are like superhuman.
Right.
Like they're
right,
all just
yeah.
people. But yeah.
But the line is so thin.
Yes,
Like you
yes.
can go, and he just walks right down the middle of it where
Yep.
one day you watch that scene, you think it's horrifying. Another day you think it's the funniest thing you've ever seen.
Yes.
Would you recommend this to people?
I would. I think if you like sort of any of the stuff we've been talking about, like if you like folk horror stuff, if you like that sort of line between like the sort of hallucinatory moments, if you watched like Mandy or Color Out of Space or Annihilation and you liked any of those, you will like this a lot. I think it's a movie you have to go into ready to like kind of let it meander and play out. I think if you're looking for something really plot driven and really like, you know, it sets down the stakes and it sets down the rules and it just stays on those rails the whole time and it plows through, then this is not the movie for you.
No, definitely not.
If you appreciate the atmosphere of stuff, this is a good one.
Yeah, I think the other thing that's interesting about this too is I've seen a few. This is very close to that style of modern indie horror.
Yeah.
Where it's like ultimately more people talking quietly than it is anything else.
Yeah.
And I think this manages to avoid falling into the traps of that because Ben Wheatley is such a unbelievable visual stylist.
Yes.
And his cinematographer, whose name I didn't look up because I'm an asshole. But it has so many interesting concepts behind it that he has the ability to illustrate.
Yeah.
That I think a lot of those other movies don't have. Like it reminded me of there's a movie I watched recently called Hellbender.
Oh, I've heard of that, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's about this woman and her daughter, and who live out isolated in the woods, and essentially they come from a long line of witches.
Ooh.
I don't know if that's a spoiler. It probably is. Apologies. So there's some cool witchy weird stuff.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of kind of hanging out and talking.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to. For some people that works. For me, it's like I think it works to a point, and then you kind of have to get on with it.
Yeah.
And I feel like this movie, thankfully, gets on with it.
Right. There are moments where it can get a little draggy.
Yeah.
But it pretty quickly moves you out of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like once you get to the final 15 minutes or so of this movie, it's just fucking nuts.
It's just tent pole stakes in the eye all the time.
Right. And the lights are going crazy, and there's smoke everywhere.
Everybody's hallucinating crazy shit.
It's like a Pink Floyd concert with loose toes flying all over the place. So yeah, I don't think I would recommend this to everybody.
Oh, of course, yeah.
But
yeah.
I would recommend it to Werner Herzog, absolutely.
Yes.
And I think there's I would recommend this to a few people. Do you think it would belong on our list?
That's a difficult proposition. You know, I actually kind of think it does.
Yeah.
I'm kind of shocked the amount of hate this movie gets.
I used to go by IMDb a lot.
Yeah.
Especially when it came to horror movies, because usually if it was like a 5, you know it's pretty bad.
Right.
But I feel like something's changed because
it's really interesting because Greg kind of had the same, like he watched it along with us last night, and at the end he was like, that was a lot better than I was expecting. I'm not gonna lie, I looked it up ahead of time, and it had like a 5 on IMDb, and I was ready for this to be
5
garbage.
It's like 5.2.
Yeah,
which is
it's not almost
bad.
a 6. It's a
right.
5.
Like this is a 5.2. Starry Eyes, I think, was in the 5s. It might be
really?
higher now. When Censor first came out, Censor was like a 5.7. Censor's at even 6 now. Censor's
another one I would kind of say if you liked Censor, you might like this.
I would say so. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Just like in terms of pacing and very different topic, but similar tone in a lot of ways. And different visual style, but a strong visual style in the way that like Censor has its own way that it looks. This one does too.
It's funny. I was actually thinking about Censor as we were watching this, specifically because you can feel that this is shot on video.
Yeah.
And in Censor, you can really feel it's shot on film.
Yeah.
Not that one of them looks better or worse than the other, but it's interesting how those things do stand out even still.
Yeah.
But yeah, like there's a lot of these movies that are newer movies that I have thought have been really pretty solid.
Yeah.
Just have really low grades, and I don't know what the deal is. I don't know what people are looking for, I guess.
Yeah, that's kind of my thing. Like if you wanted A Quiet Place Part 2, this ain't it.
Yeah, I
You
mean
know,
I feel
like-
like a lot of horror movies that come out, it's either a smash hit, oh my god,
Best movie ever.
best
yeah.
movie ever, or it's like a 5,
Right.
and it's like,
Yeah. Like
I don't
I
know.
will fully say I very much agree that this is not for everyone.
right,
But I do think, like you were saying, it's a really good example of a modern take on a folk horror movie.
Mhm.
And I think it deals with enough interesting stuff from an interesting time to make this kind of movie that it's worth, I think it's worth putting on the list. But
yeah. I would say, I don't know if it deserves to be on the list explicitly based on. It's a tough one because, like, I feel like part of me wants to say yes because it is such a good modernization of
I
a
kind of wouldn't be
traditional
surprised
genre.
if it wasn't on the list in a couple more years.
Yeah,
You
that
know,
would be interesting.
like if
Yeah.
people sort of had time to sort of look back on it and go, "Oh, wait, what was that one about again?"
Yeah,
And try it again and be like, "Oh, I get it now."
yeah. I think there are a couple movies on the list that we're going to hit at some point.
Yeah.
That kind of are in the same wheelhouse as this.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be interesting to see other ones that pop up where it's like, okay, this seems kind of similar to In the Earth.
Yeah.
Why is this one on the list while the other one isn't?
Agree.
It would be remiss if we didn't mention Clint Mansell, who did the music for this.
Yes.
I actually bought the soundtrack today. The music
I
is
was
fucking
tempted
awesome.
to. I was really tempted to after I held back because I recently got like 2 or 3 new records. I don't need more.
Did
But
you look it up? Because it's only $13 on Amazon.
well, I gotta go buy something, guys. I'll talk to you next time.
No, the music is fantastic. Clint Mansell is like a monster of
He's the
soundtracks.
the Parnog Feg of
Kind of
soundtracks.
He's Darren Aronofsky's guy. He does
Yeah.
like all the Aronofsky movies. He's like, I'll just going through the some of his movies here. Pie, Requiem for a Dream,
Oh, jeez.
The Fountain, The Wrestler, Moon,
Oh, wow.
Blood the Last Vampire, Black Swan,
Oh, wow.
Mass Effect 3, the video game,
Cool.
High Rise, which is also a
Yep.
Ben Wheatley movie.
Yep.
He did an episode. He did the soundtrack for the Black Mirror episode San Junipero.
Oh, I
which
haven't
is-
seen that.
That's the one episode from that series where I think that they actually sold the soundtrack. So
Oh.
because people went crazy over the soundtrack of that. Anyway, long story short,
Yeah.
he seems to be Ben Wheatley's guy too because
Yeah.
he looks like he does all of his movies. But
Cool.
great composer, really intense musical stylings, and does a great job in this. That like
Yes.
the visuals. It's one of those movies where the story is interesting, but the visuals and the soundtrack
Yeah.
bring it up to another level. I saw a few people compare it to John Carpenter's Prince of Darkness. Have you seen that
I
one?
have not seen that one.
It's a really interesting one that maybe we'll do somewhere down the line. But it's
Okay.
it's another one where it's like it's a lot more deliberate and a lot more some kind of headier themes going on than he usually deals with in his stuff,
Cool.
which may or may not involve the literal embodiment of the devil being held in a church in the basement of a church. It's
Wow.
cool. It's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's
I'm intrigued. I'm just
Yeah.
shocked that this is a John Carpenter movie.
Yeah, it's probably one of his. It's probably on like the second tier
Uh-huh.
of movies he's known for. So like the general populace know your Halloweens and Escape from New York's, but like
Yes.
if you
If you're watching The Serpent in the Rainbow.
yeah if you're getting into John Carpenter, like
Yeah.
the next one that you find is usually Prince of Darkness. But,
Cool.
and then you watch Ghost of Mars and you just bottom out. But yeah, I think that's going to do it for us. Normally, I would hit the randomizer button, but I am curious to watch another pandemic movie because we have
Ooh.
another one on the list.
Yeah.
Just to kind of compare and contrast a little bit. So next week, what we're going to do is we're going to watch number 34. This is 34,
Wow.
which is Host.
Damn.
Yeah.
I feel like that one made quite a leap onto the list.
It's been pretty high since it's been on there.
Yeah.
But 34
That's
is very high
Yeah.
for a movie that came out last year. But that being said, I think it's fantastic, so I'm looking forward to watching it again. It's really short, too. It's like 68 minutes or something.
Perfect.
But yeah, thank you guys for listening. If you want to help support the show, you can join our Patreon, which is at patreon.com/thepensky-file. The Pensky File is kind of our umbrella corporation, if you will.
Brains.
And on there, Amanda and I, this year, we are doing the second string of Stephen King. We're covering the lesser-known Stephen King adaptations, some of the ones that are not on our main list. And you can also get every episode of our coverage of Friday the 13th that we did last year.
Yep.
But yeah, thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting the show. And thank you, Amanda.
Thank you, Clay.
And we will see you guys next time.
Bye, everyone.